say most of your time is probably 70–80% of your time is just doing the business of the organization, closing the books, procuring new technology, doing background investigations, going and doing outreach, and then all the other processes you have. Where do you work? Finance. So again, we talked about close, what are the basic, making sure the budget's done on time, things like that. Everyone participated. When we talk SMS, we're talking about only this reason. All this, we're just speaking about challenging assumptions. It's not controlling performance. It's not checking health and progress. It's just challenging assumptions. And the assumptions we're looking at are the assumptions around the strategy. Are these objectives getting us the performance improvement we need to get to our vision? Okay? So we are evaluating using performance measures if the underlying assumptions, the objectives, are valid. Do they make sense? Are we making progress? So we're using measures to learn. Okay? So this is just making sure we're under control, doesn't require a lot of attention, managing business operations day to day, which requires quite a bit of attention. And then in some selected instances, we're sitting down, collecting measured data to ask a series of questions around, are we getting more competitive as an organization? Are we getting closer to achieving our highest level aims? And if not, why not? And then what do we need to do differently? Okay? Now that's a discussion where it does make sense to bring everyone in and sit down and say, what is this measure telling us? I'm not really sure. It's very clear what the measure around the shop floor pressure level at the oil refinery says. There's no confusion about that. We know pounds per square inch or whatever it is. It's not clear when we're talking about collaboration level. It's not the same. It's hard to understand. So we had a lot of meetings, but what came out of that? I mean, so my point is, the measures we use for SMS are focused on this third reason. The problem is managers mix them all. Here's where we start to run into trouble. I've got an oil gauge measure, I've got a security division process measure and a budget measure, and I've got a measure around how good collaboration is. What do you think happens when we mix all those measures on a template or on a spreadsheet? What do we end up talking about? These things. We generally don't know how to talk about these things.
So we should, I guess, at the...
Absolutely. You're going back to test the strategy. What happens if you run the meetings the wrong way is you mix the measures in the meetings. And then you have discussions that are operations meetings, which are problem solving, which are not learning meetings about the strategy.
So it seems, so you were saying, so if the gauge is green in your refinery,
Yeah.
then we don't do anything, but the moment it hits...
We are measuring all the time on a continuous basis, but when it goes out of control is when the action. Remember, the reasons correlate with the actions and the things we do as a manager. If there's nothing out of control, there's no action really. Here we're just monitoring to see how the day-to-day variation of the security process is or how long it's taking to close the books, okay? In this case, because it's new to strategy, we don't always know what the measures are going to tell us. So we don't necessarily want to use these old measures for other things here because it's not going to tell us anything new, right? And that's kind of where we start running into some of these problems around strategy and operations. Go ahead.
I may have an example for challenge assumptions.
All right. Some of you are not clear, I can tell. So what we'll do is we'll do another example here. This will make perfect sense in a minute. You're not buying into that. Oh, I could use another color. All right. So has anyone ever flown on Southwest Airlines? Okay. Now, let's imagine Herb Kelleher, I think he's still the CEO, says, you know what, I've been following your work at the FBI. It's impressive. In fact, I need to take a month-long vacation, and I'd like you to run the company. Wow, fascinating. But I don't know anything about airlines. Don't worry about it. It's easy. Okay, so what are some of the things you think they measure at Southwest Airlines? On-time arrival and departure. Sure. What else? How many seats they have available, and then how many people are flying. It's called load factor. Sure. Okay. So one's a capacity measure and then a fill rate. What else? Customer sat. Sure. How long it takes to get on and off the plane. Sure. How much fuel we use. Employee retention. I mean, there's no shortage to the measures we can come up with. Okay. Right? Now, which of those is strategic? None of them? Well, but honestly, how does Southwest compete? We have to understand what the strategy is first, right? So how does Southwest compete, from what you know? Is it service? Is it a great service experience? I mean, they roll the blanket out and they bring you the great food and then the free headphones. Is it a great, here's the menu. I'll have 17 of the 18 peanuts today. Thank you. It's low cost. It's low cost, and it tends to be low price, okay, which is why people tend to fly it, which is why I don't fly it. I mean, there's a whole, we're getting to segmentation and stuff, right? When I fly on Southwest, I have an expectation when I fly that the plane lands every time. I don't need to clap. I don't know if you've ever been on one of these flights where they all start clapping. There's no clapping when the plane lands. It's supposed to land, okay? That's not a miracle, the miracle of flight, okay? But the fact of the matter is, one of the ways Southwest competes is on low cost, and it's fast ground turnaround. So I would argue a lot of the measures you've talked about are good operational measures, right? You got to know how many people are flying. Got to know how many seats are available. On-time departure rates links to an industry performance measure. Fuel consumption, that speaks to how much money we're going to make. These measures generally will fall in operations, okay? So there's a set of finance measures. There's probably a set of IT measures. There's a set of workforce morale measures. There's a customer sat measures. There's a bunch of different measures that you, Herb Kelleher's replacement, are probably looking at in your operations meeting. I'm going to look at those on what's called a dashboard. And I'd probably have a dashboard by each different area, finance dashboard, maintenance dashboard, whatever. There's a set of KPIs. Anyone ever heard this term of art? Was a KPI? What is it? Key performance indicator. Oftentimes those are linked, not always, but you use those sort of those are on a dashboard. They're operational type metrics. And then you've got the big long dashboard, think of it like a giant Excel spreadsheet, although you can use systems to pull this information out. But my point is, you need those to run the airline, but only a handful of those are going to be strategic, like this fast ground turnaround, because that keeps the planes in the air more, and that helps make us money more. Other strategic measures might be around the ground crew. How well trained are they in order to deliver that fast ground turnaround? You might have a customer sat measure that is around satisfaction of a particular segment because we're trying to target that segment. So what's important to understand is how you use those measures. We could go here and come up with 200 different measures. I would argue and they're all important, but important doesn't make them strategic. Important means we run the organization by monitoring these. Reason 2, check health and progress. But the strategic ones just ask the question of, are we linking to the strategy? So my point to you is, when you pick your 20 or 25 measures for your division that link to your bubbles, okay, to test whether or not the strategy is working, the assumptions are valid,